Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you're all having a good day. I'm having an excellent one. As you can see right here, I have been trading a lot of redstone from my clerics, which is good because today we're going to do a lot of redstone upgrades to the copper aging facility that we have here in the dripstone cave. This is something that I've been planning on doing for a while, and I really wanted to get hold of a decent supply of redstone before we did, so the clerics out there are going to be perfect for what I have in mind today. Let's hop on down to the copper aging factory floor and I'll show you what's up. So right now all of the copper that we've loaded into here has more or less finished aging, but right now we don't have a way of automatically detecting when that has happened. So we pretty much have to rely on the evidence of our own eyes to see, yes, all of this stuff is oxidized. Let's pull the lever and recall all of the flying machines that will deliver the oxidized copper back to the center of the factory here so that we can collect it, which right now is happening manually. We might not be able to work on that today. I'm not sure if I will have time with all of the upgrades I want to make here, but we will definitely be able to make a start on that process, because I have in mind some upgrades, which I'll probably do on this half of the room first, because this half of the room looks a lot prettier and I kind of don't want to mess with that right now. But over here on the other half of the room, I want to road test an automatic copper collection mechanism, or rather an automatic system that's going to detect when copper has aged. Weird, there's a grass block left there by some endermen, presumably. Anyway, like right down here, you can see that right here we have one piece of exposed copper, which is the stage just after the original block of copper, and there are definitely a couple down this line which aren't quite fully aged yet, even though the majority of this has already oxidized. Detecting copper aging automatically is something I've avoided doing because I figured it was going to take quite a lot of redstone, but I've actually managed to compact it down to a design which will fit inside of the area we have here between each of these circuits, because naturally we have 4 blocks of space between them so that the copper is away from any other copper blocks that are going to cause it to age slower. And for this system we're going to need a bunch of comparators, we're going to need some droppers, and we're going to need an unusual redstone component in the form of cake. But it's kind of difficult to explain this circuit without building it here, and if we're building it here, it's going to take a little while to explain how the aging detection works. So the best place to demonstrate this revision to the circuit is going to be here in our creative test flat world, because I think it's going to be a little easier to show the different stages of copper oxidizing if we're doing that in creative instead of waiting for it to happen in survival. So we're going to drop a copper block into the circuit. We're just going to grab one of those and we'll throw that in there. And this is the isolator circuit that we've already got set up in the Minecraft Survival Guide world. In order to detect the copper aging, we're going to need to have an observer facing into it, and the observer is going to emit 1 redstone pulse each time the copper block changes state. It's also going to emit a redstone pulse when the copper block is first loaded in. So for example, if we put that there, it pulses once, and that should activate something which is going to basically count off the stages that this copper block goes through as it ages. To do that, we're going to put a solid block here, and then we're going to activate a dropper, or a dispenser, but I think a dropper is going to make more sense here using this solid block. And the reason we need a solid block there instead of just activating the dropper straight up is because there's going to be another dropper directly underneath that, and powering this dropper would also power that dropper, and it would push the items back up. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a solid block right here, we're going to have a dropper facing down, we'll leave a solid block on the ground here, and another dropper facing back up. So when this observer activates, it's going to force this dropper to push one of the items stored in it into the dropper below. And for this, we're going to use non-stackable items. In this case, we're going to be using wooden shovels because they're relatively cheap to make. There's just 2 sticks and 1 plank. And so when we remove the copper block from the circuit, you'll notice that this has pulsed twice because the observer is going to detect that the block is removed and it's going to detect the piston pushing back in front. We'll deal with that problem later, but for now we're going to have 4 of the wooden shovels in here. If we put the copper block here, it should have removed 1 from the dropper. There we go. And that's now in the dropper down below. As the dropper down here accumulates wooden shovels, we are going to detect its content using a redstone comparator. Unfortunately, right now what it's done is eject the mechanism because it's switched off that redstone torch by powering the block below. So regardless of what signal this comparator outputs, it is going to power the redstone torch. So we need to make sure that the comparator receives a side input signal that is going to be large enough to make sure that the dropper doesn't activate this comparator and doesn't start producing a redstone signal from this comparator until all 4 of these shovels are in the dropper below, because it will need 4 wooden shovels in order to go through the 4 different stages of the copper block being loaded in, turning into exposed copper, then to weathered copper, then to oxidized copper, and by that point all 4 wooden shovels should be in this dropper below. So we want to make sure that the side input signal is strong enough that 4 wooden shovels is needed to activate that comparator, and we're going to do that with cake. For now, I'm just going to remove this comparator so that the circuit rearms, and we should put 1 wooden shovel in here, just so it's ready to go, and we can measure what signal strength we need from the side input comparator, so that the comparator that's switching off the redstone torch will only do that when there are 4 shovels remaining in the dropper. So if we put the comparator back here now, you will notice that it's being disabled by the fact that there is a full cake here, and so this should now be outputting a full signal strength of 14. I believe that's the way it works with cake. It's basically 2 redstone signal per slice. So if I eat a few layers of this cake, we'll start to see that once we get down to 3 remaining slices here, that's when, if we activate this circuit one more time, if we just end up putting the shovel in here manually, that's when the circuit can disable itself, because there is not enough cake here for the redstone comparator to keep up a high enough signal strength, and that will allow this comparator to activate, which switches off the circuit. I'll show you that over here with a fully made up redstone circuit, and we got some command blocks set up here which are just going to replace the copper block in the machine with the different states of aging copper. So let's make sure this machine is all loaded up. We're going to pop a copper block on there. That should be dragged into the machine, where the cake is going to make sure that this comparator doesn't activate quite yet. We've already dropped 1 wooden shovel into the dropper below. If I press this, we should go forward to the exposed copper stage, and you'll notice another shovel has gone from there. The weathered copper stage should add another shovel in there, and finally oxidized copper, and the block gets ejected from the machine. All 4 of our wooden shovels are now in this dropper below, and this is ready to pick up. And you'll notice that when we do something here, the circuit is still disabled, so it can still work the way we want it to, where the flying machines are going to come back through and pick up all of the oxidized copper. In fact, we can maybe even activate the flying machines manually once all of these circuits have been powered thanks to the comparators here. Once all of those oxidized copper blocks have been collected, though, we need a way to reset the wooden shovels in this top dropper. So all we need to do is pulse the block underneath the second dropper 4 times, which is going to push all of the wooden shovels back up into the dropper on top. All we need to do is have a pulse coming from an observer clock. We just press 1 button and it should activate enough times that all 4 of the wooden shovels have been returned to the top of the dropper circuit, meaning we can input another copper block and the process begins again. And we should be able to take a redstone output from the comparator over here and wire that into probably an AND gate, something that's basically going to turn off a bunch of redstone torches over here, and it will only activate the flying machine once all of those redstone torches have been switched off. That way, every circuit in one line of our factory has to test for whether or not this dropper has 4 wooden shovels in it, and that's the only thing that's going to activate the flying machine to pick all of the copper blocks back up again, and that should allow for automatic collection from our copper farm. Now, the one time a circuit like this might run into trouble is if a piece of exposed copper ends up getting in the circuit, if it ages one stage before it even makes it to the circuit that's going to be holding it in place separate from all of the other copper, and that may still be the case. So we might need to put in some kind of failsafe here, some kind of button we can press that manually ejects some copper from the circuit if it looks like it's aged prematurely. But that's something we can work out later, and honestly, if we load these machines 1 row at a time, we're probably not going to see that issue occurring very often. So let's hop back into the survival guide world. We're going to need to make a few upgrades, but first of all, we'll need to make an awful amount of cake. And crafting a cake costs you 3 wheat, 3 buckets of milk, although you get the buckets back, 2 sugar, and 1 egg, which is quite a complex crafting recipe and requires a lot of preparation if you want to do it that way. Luckily for us, there is another way, because farmer villagers will actually trade cake. So if we get 1 emerald and trade it to this guy, he will sell us a cake in exchange. And while cakes in Java Edition are not stackable, we should at least be able to fill up a couple of shulker boxes with them and take them all back over to our dripstone cave so that we can eat lots and lots of slices of cake in order to make this work. And so we're going to need to turn some of the redstone dust that we've traded from clerics into droppers, observers, and comparators. And yes, it is worth noting that we don't have to use cake as that side input comparator signal. We could use something else, but honestly, where's the fun in that? It is actually my birthday as I record this, and so the fact that we're using cake as a redstone component is kind of the best thing ever. I want to be able to eat a lot of slices of cake today. Oh, and before I forget, one last thing that I figured I should do in this video, since somebody brought it up in the comments of the last video, is make sure there is a lightning rod around here so that lightning strikes can be attracted to it, and these villagers here here won't get hit by lightning and turn into witches. Zombies would be fine, because now that we've traded with them, actually, each of these villagers will not despawn even if they become a zombie villager, even if a zombie does somehow get in there and attack them. But the transformation into a witch is unfortunately very final. Like, you can't transform them back. It is incurable. So we do need to make sure that there is a lightning rod nearby to make sure that any lightning strikes around here won't harm the villagers. I thought that I had a lightning rod kind of closer over here at my ink farm that was going to do the trick, but I can't be so sure that this villager encampment over here is going to be within the radius of that lightning rod. It might be slightly too far away, so I figured we might as well play it safe and have a lightning rod over here to make sure that that's not going to happen. The main thing I'm back over here for, actually, is sticks, so that I can make a bunch more redstone torches, because gosh, comparators are a pricey thing. But at least having all of these redstone components to craft is going to make good use of all of the stone and cobblestone that we've been digging out of this area, because my storage at spawn is full, and I kind of didn't know what I was going to do with it all otherwise. But at least we now have all of the supplies we should need to give this a try. The main thing we need to do first is recall all of the copper, because building this with the copper already in place kind of defeats the point. But it always makes me smile recalling all of the copper and having all of the fly machines deliver it back here to the center. We've only got 1 or 2 blocks of weathered or exposed copper in here, and the rest of it is fully oxidized, so we can throw those back into the machine on this side, where we're not going to make the upgrades quite yet. On this side, we need to make sure it is all fresh, new blocks of copper. And honestly, one of the trickiest parts of this is going to be managing my hunger levels. Like, whenever I get down to lower levels of hunger, right here, I really want to start eating food just to make up for it, but in this case, we're not going to be able to do that. So let's grab a couple of blocks, not the copper. We don't want to have those around. Let's use, I don't know, maybe orange terracotta for this? Actually, let's use blue, because we already have the blue terracotta down here anyway, and that's what's going to be conducting the power to the rest of it. Let's see if we have some of that left. Okay, we'll probably make a little bit more in a second. But the observer detecting this piston needs to output into a block, as I mentioned earlier. We need a dropper facing downwards there, and another dropper facing upwards there. The comparator is going to sit on that block here, because this whole circuit is built into the floor, unlike in my creative test world. We're going to come in 2 blocks to the side, like so, and we'll have another cake on the opposite side. In fact, we might even be able to power 2 of these circuits from 1 cake if we just have a comparator facing in this way and that way, and then maybe another comparator there, or maybe just a comparator with a redstone signal like that, because the observer is still going to power this redstone dust okay, even if it's redirected slightly differently. Like over here it's directed into this comparator, over here it's directed into the side of this. Honestly though, I kind of think we should just do 2 cakes for the sake of symmetry. I like the symmetry of this contraption a lot. I kind of don't want to sacrifice that, even though it's going to mean eating a lot more cake, but that's what we're here to do anyway. So we want to eat 1, 2, 3, 4 slices of this cake, and 1, 2, and I'm going to have to work up the hunger for the other 2 slices as well. Unfortunately, the slices of cake are always eaten from west to east, so no matter which way we're facing, we won't be able to rotate the cake in any specific direction, so maybe it's not going to look quite as symmetrical as I had hoped, but either way, it's better than running the system off of 1 cake, I think. The other thing we got to do is start crafting non-stackable items, because we will need wooden shovels to go in each of these. We could also do shears. If you have an abundance of iron, shears is not a bad call either, and as long as it's a dropper, the dropper won't attempt to use the items in the same way that a dispenser would, so stuff like shears won't be a problem. And right now, the comparator over here is looking at this repeater, but that's not going to be a repeater, is it? It's going to be another comparator. I'm thinking as far as our manual eject mechanism goes, we might have a button up here or something. We might have a button on top of this block to power the dropper a couple more times if we want to manually eject the contents of this in case one of the blocks ages slightly sooner. Maybe we'll do something like that. I do think we'll end up with a glass floor over the top of this so that we can see exactly when the copper blocks have aged and make sure nothing goes wrong inside the system. Maybe I should go with stone shovels instead, considering that I have a bunch of cobblestone lying around and a ton of sticks, but I don't have that much more wood on me right here. But anyway, I'm going to continue down the room, making changes to the circuits as we go, and hopefully we should be able to get about half of the room done today. It's going to take a lot of cake eating, but I think I'm up to the challenge. If you're the kind of person who likes cake, and you've probably had a few birthdays where you've celebrated and eaten slices of cake, how many slices of cake would you say you had eaten on your birthday? Maximum, top level of cake eating. We're probably talking maybe like 1 or 2 slices at most, right? Guess how many slices of cake I ate for my birthday this year? 488. Well, actually, 484, because I just ate a few more for a demonstration. But the fact is, we have a whole lot of cake that's been eaten down to the last 3 slices in this system. And you know what? the system works. As you can see, now going down the line here, we have copper in various states of aging, and the copper that is fully aged has been pushed out of the system. Now, I did have to do a couple of rearrangements here. I started off with the cake in the middle on this side, but then I realized that this piece of redstone, if you put a comparator in here, in this block, was actually connecting to the side input of the comparator, and that was causing the flying machine to trigger this piece of redstone dust and prevent the comparator from blocking this redstone signal, which was causing a few issues with the amount of wooden shovels that were ending up in the droppers, so that we couldn't count stuff by the methods that I had originally laid out. But then all we needed to do was flip the cake over to the opposite side, on the sort of inside of each of these circuits, because this redstone torch here isn't having any effect on the side input of the comparator whatsoever, and all of these cakes are now providing a redstone signal of 6 to this comparator here, and that means once this dropper fills up with 4 wooden shovels, this comparator will match 6 or output slightly higher. I can't remember exactly what 4 shovels in here would do. Maybe it gets to 7, maybe it doesn't, but either way, we end up with this comparator overriding the side input signal and activating the circuit to push one of those fully aged copper blocks back out. And if you're doing this at home and you're probably thinking, I really don't want to eat this amount of cake, then trust me, there are other ways of doing it, and this is where my demonstration cake comes in. A single cake with 3 slices left outputs a redstone signal of 6 when measured with a comparator. That's the same as a barrel with 10 items in it, a composter that's been filled up to the 6th level of compost inside of it, an item in an item frame pointing that way, having been rotated a few times until the signal strength out the front of this comparator measures 6, a lectern with 6 pages in the book turned to page 3 in the lectern will measure an output signal strength of 6 as well, along with a music disc playing in a jukebox. Specifically, the music disc Mall will give you a redstone signal strength of 6. But you will need to do that 180 times to get the amount of circuits that we have right here, and this is only 90 of them. The other 90 are on the opposite side of the room, waiting for the cake retrofit to be applied, but I don't feel like getting hold of 180 copies of the music disc Mall, so instead we are doing this using cakes, and I'm quite happy with this. I think it turned out splendidly well. The remaining upgrades we are going to make here, and there are a few, there's a bit of a checklist I have going on in my brain right now. First of all, the main thing we need to do is measure a piece of redstone on the opposite side of this honey block here, because that's going to receive a redstone signal from the comparator. That's going to power this repeater. This repeater is going to turn off a series of redstone torches. It's going to turn off the redstone torch here. This one on this side is going to turn off the adjoining redstone torch, and then a piece of redstone dust here is going to be deactivated. When that happens, for each of the circuits going down the line, they're all going to trail together into one long piece of redstone dust, which is going to, once all of those things have turned off, turned on a redstone torch on this side here, which is going to activate our flying machine and send it back down the line to collect all of the blocks. Basically, a giant AND gate. And I've never been the smartest when it comes to using logic gates in Minecraft, but this one is probably one of the most straightforward. Basically, every single circuit has to be doing exactly the same thing for a reaction to happen at the other end. So in this case, all of the redstone torches have to be turned off for something down the other end to switch on. And that's basically this, and 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 this will all need to match the same behavior in order to have a result at the other end. That's what an AND gate is in layman's terms. That's a very simplified explanation, and I'm sure all of the electronics majors in the comments are shaking their heads at me right now. But that's the way that's going to work. I might try wiring it a couple of different ways, and we'll probably revisit this in a future episode, because I'm not sure if we'll have time for it right now, but I'm working on the idea for this AND gate that's going to activate the flying machine for collection, which will automatically collect everything. Once it reaches the terminus over here and drops off all of those copper blocks, I want to have a receiver set up here, which is going to activate when the flying machine reaches this station, and that's going to pulse each of these droppers at the bottom of the circuits here 4 times. Actually, it's going to pulse the block below to make sure that it doesn't update the dropper up here as well and provide redstone power to that. So it's going to pulse this block here 4 times, and that's going to eject all of the shovels from this dropper back into the dropper above to reset the system. And that way, no more flicking levers for me, which is quite a good thing, because the amount of times I've forgotten to flick this lever when I sent the flying machines back off, and then they just coast down to the end of the room with the copper still attached and none of the circuits either side pulling the blocks off. I think it's probably for the best that we automate that stuff, just so my failing human memory isn't going to be tripped up by stuff like that in future. But once all of that wiring is done, we should then be able to sort out some stuff like unloading and loading more copper, and how exactly we're going to do that, how we're going to start the flying machines moving, that kind of stuff. I think all of that is going to have to wait for a future episode. Once I've done a bit of tinkering and set up one of these rows just to make sure that everything works according to plan, because the first time I did this with the cake on the inside, I did all of the entire room here. Basically, all of the cake for this entire thing was laid out, and I was just going through systematically eating slices, and then I decided to put copper into it and found out that I needed to rewire it with the cake on the opposite side, which was a very time-consuming process. But it was a fun way to spend my birthday anyway, and I hope you folks have enjoyed this little upgrade to the copper field here. We are going to be doing some more stuff on this in the near future, and yes, I do plan on decorating the entire thing. It just helps to get all the redstone wiring and stuff out of the way first. That way, you know what is left for you to decorate. And so, folks, that is where we're going to leave it for this episode of the Minecraft Survival Guide. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I do hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope the redstone stuff hasn't been too baffling for you all. Don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I'll see you folks soon. Take care. Bye for now.